All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another SPFBOX Indie Author Live Chat panel. I am so excited to be here with 5 new faces. If you've been following the Blitz, you know we have been doing this since last Saturday. We have already had 15 panels tune in, and we've had so many people. It's been fantastic. We're down to the last 3 days, and here you guys are, very middle, with only 3 days left to go. We got Anthony on, we have Talib on, we have Jan on, we have Ivor on, and we have YR on. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, and RA's watching, Luna's on. If you're watching live, we love to see your comments. That's why we're doing them live and we're not pre-recorded. So you can drop questions or whatever you'd like to know in there. Yes, good to see everybody. So, self-published fantasy blog off. Year number 10. That is why we're here. All 6 of us had books drawn. Luck of the draw, the coin toss. I keep going coin toss that Mark Lawrence organized this year. So we put our books in a pool and they selected 300 randomly to go through to the judging. And for those who are new and just picking this up for the first time, that means that there are 10 bloggers assigned to read about 30 books each. So we're going to meet these authors, hear about your books, see what we're up against. Anthony, why don't you kick us off and tell us about your experience with SPFBO and what book you entered, and then we'll just go around the circle.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I feel very blessed to have this opportunity to get some eyes on my book. I'm a new author. This is my book. It is The Best of Us is the Last of Us. It is the first book of 4 in the very first epic of my series, the Dracaena Blood Saga. There will be about 4 epics in the series, all of them having multiple books, and the other 3 books in the first epic are already completed, and I'll be releasing those through the summer and fall. So I'm pretty excited about that. This is my very first experience with SPFBO. So I don't really know what to expect. I've just kind of taken it all in as we go, and hoping for the best. Like I said, just excited to get eyeballs on my work, especially as a new author. The story is a story of mystery, intrigue, inspiration, and self-discovery. Centers on post-traumatic growth, from like what can happen when you show resilience and perseverance in the face of life's greatest tragedies. It has all the best tropes, I think, that avid fantasy readers like to read, like good versus evil, epic quests. It's got prophecy, mythical creatures. It's got medieval influence, and dragons, of course, among others. My writing style is very vivid and poetic. So I've been told by my readers that it sucks you into the story right away and holds you there. And then they have a trouble putting the book down. So it's a nice endorsement. The book itself is very important to me. It's important to me because I started writing it about 3 weeks before my dad was diagnosed with inoperable glioblastoma. So if you're not familiar with that term, it's brain cancer. He ended up dying about 3.5 months after initial diagnosis, but he was an avid reader, and his favorite thing to do during his battle with cancer was listen to my mom read the rough draft chapters of this book as I turned them out. So that's pretty special to me. And it's also special to me because it is a metaphorical biography of my life given a fantasy twist. When I sat down to write a book, my fiance gave me the advice to just write what I know. And so I kind of took experiences from my life and gave them a fantasy twist. So it's also very special to me in that regard. I chose to center strong women in my book as the protagonists. And I mainly use the men as foil for them, but that's not to say that the men are inferior in any way, because they're not. It's more so that I wanted to honor the strong, dynamic women in my life who have helped me get to where I am. And then also, I wanted to provide solid examples of strong, resilient, and determined women for my daughters, because I have two teenage daughters that love to read, and I want them to see examples of who I hope they can grow to become in their lives.
Oh, that's great. So we're going
Yeah.
to get to characters a little later in the blog, and I'm interested to see what kind of main character you've got when we get there.
Yeah, I've got a lot of them. And then one other thing I wanted to touch on, because it could be kind of a trigger warning for people, is there is sexual abuse and trauma in my book, and that was very difficult for me to write, but it is based on my life experience, and it is estimated that 27% of men experience sexual abuse in their lives, and we're just kind of conditioned by society to think we need to be strong and silent about our trauma, like kind of like the stoic Western cowboy, but that actually prevents real healing. And so being vulnerable about my own experience and my trauma has really gone a long way for healing for myself. And I'm hoping that by putting my vulnerability on a big stage, I can help other men, acknowledge and heal from theirs as well. So that's kind of why I'm so grateful to have such a opportunity like this, especially with my first novel.
Yeah, that's a really powerful story to get out there.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you
you.
so much for
Yeah.
sharing it. And it's like whenever I hear a debut author go, I'm putting my debut in to SPFBO, I was like, we're going to just throw it to the wolves. But
Right?
it's in a good way, right? You
Yeah.
couldn't have a more positive community of writers around you in a book contest, I don't think. Then
Yeah, I'm learning that about SPFBO, and it seems like a really awesome community of people that are very supportive. So I'm excited to be a part of it.
we're excited you're here. I'm so
Thank
excited
you.
to meet you too. And I love your book cover and your book title. But why don't you tell everybody what your book's about and your experience with SPFBO so far?
Sure. So my name is Talib Razi. My book is called The Enchanter's Council. So this is the cover that you're talking about, Katherine. And this is my first SPFBO. I don't even know really what possessed me to enter this book in, but this is my debut novel. I think I just joined the Facebook group and suddenly was like, it's time. I've written the sequel to this book already, and then I'm also working on the next book after that, actually. So I'm put this one out there, and I'm excited to keep writing this series. So the series is called The Coin of Fate, and this book, The Enchanter's Council. Interestingly, what you said, Katherine, about like this being a flip of the coin, the whole story takes place on like a coin world. Like if you imagine a spinning coin, it's kind of spinning like this. And so, just to be real quick, the premise, the phrase that I like to tell people about the series and the novel is that it's Middle Earth in the Middle East. So it's kind of like, imagining dwarves, but they're kind of Middle Eastern with the big beards, and they have this special mineral that's like the oil of their world, that their people are fighting over it. And so essentially there's an east and a west side of the coin, and in the middle there's a rim, and the rim has these special gemstones, which are very valuable, and they are used for this new magic called enchanting. So people used to do magic through their own hands, and then they discover this magical enchanting thing, and then sort of what they called the Old War happens. 1,000 years of people of the east and west sides, basically the goblin and the elf sides, fighting over the rim, kind of like crusades and colonialism, kind of inspired by our world. And then when the story starts place, the Old War has finished for about 100 years, and this character here, Mizan, he's a goblin, and he is studying to be an enchanter, which is the prevalent form of magic at the time. And so the story is about how he's searching for a job, and he's searching for to be this thing that he imagines to make his parents happy. He's a son of immigrants, so like you were saying, Anthony, like very autobiographical, but in the form of fantasy world. and he's the son of immigrants. He wants to please his parents. He wants to get this prestigious job. He finds himself finding out some really messed up things about enchanting and something about the effect that enchanting has. So it kind of has like a little bit of an environmentalism in the mix as well, a little bit environmental climate fiction kind of story. And part of it was because growing up, I loved fantasy novels. Like I ate up the R.A. Salvatore, Wizards of the Coast kind of novels. But as a person from South Asia, and if you read a lot of and a Muslim, when you read a lot of the Tolkien and especially C.S. Lewis and Narnia, you can see that the bad guys have curved swords and names with Kha, Ra, especially if you look at Tashlan or in Narnia, and for example, if there is a good guy from those races, it would be like Driz Do'Urden, who's like the one of the good ones. There's one good. So, growing up, like I would be told like, oh, you're the good Talib, not like the rest of the bad Taliban. They would make me like you're the good exception kind of thing. So I wanted to tell a story where, what if the story of Lord of the Rings was kind of just one side's version after they won the war, where there's this big empire and all these groups of free folk come together to carve up this empire of evil. And what if that was kind of like how the Ottoman Empire was carved up by the British and the French and so on. And so in the story, I kind of describe it like, for some comparisons, I would say it's like Discworld, like instead of a coin, a disc, it's a coin, this way. So it's got a lot of that satire element of Terry Pratchett. He's one of my favorite writers, but also some of, Lord of the Rings, a little D&D and gaming references, a little bit of Avatar, The Last Airbender as well, because there's a lot of elemental, like different cultures kind of correspond to different of the four elements. And, this people learning about different cultures. So like from the coin people's perspective, they would be like, someone on this side will say, oh, you're the Underlander. No, I'm not the Underlander. You're the Underlander. Because from each of their perspectives, someone is below them. And so, yeah, it's kind of a little bit of all of those, a little bit of City of Brass. If anyone's read that, it's got a little bit of Sarah Chakraborty's kind of vibes as well. And yeah, I'm really excited to enter the contest. I'm also very nervous, but I'm very happy to meet you all and to learn about all these books, and to get further in the writing craft, because I'm working on the next book and the next book already. So really excited to see everyone putting in the work.
That is so exciting. 2 debuts in the same panel and so much world building. Yay for epic fantasy.
I wish I had got Esme, because she's the Discworld. Her name is a Discworld name, but that's fine.
So Jan, welcome. What flavor of fantasy are you bringing to SPFBO?
Oh, you're muted.
Hold on, we gotta unmute you. Let's see if we can unmute. There you go.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yay! Yes.
Yay! Hello. I write historical fantasy. As you may be able to tell, the book that I've actually got in SPFBO is that one, the blue one, which is called Destiny Awaiting. And yeah, it's a full-on historical fantasy, pretty heavy on the history, to be fair. I do start with the history in my writing process. And that particular book is based in 1415, which is, for those history buffs amongst you, is when Henry V invaded France and had the fairly epic battle which ended in Agincourt. So it's that journey, if you like. My characters unwittingly go on the journey with Henry V from, well, they leave Scotland and end up in Wales, go with Owain ap Tudor, who becomes the grandfather of the Tudor dynasty. And they end up going all the way through to Harfleur and then on to Agincourt for their journey. So it is a journey, but it's also an enemies to lovers romance, because it's magical realism. So my 2 main characters, and it's dual point of view. Aoife is a fae, literally fae with wings, and she crash lands and interrupts Tal, who is in the middle of robbing a church, which is not great. And he gets a very rude awakening to the whole supernatural world when they get busted again by a priest who turns out to be a vampire. So yeah, he then has to take her to go to the authorities and they start on this massive quest, if you like. So there's a whole load of it's partly about observing the differences. She has a very long-term perspective on things because she is nearly immortal, and he has a human perspective on the supernatural and doesn't understand any of it. So you have a lot of conflict there in how they see things very, very differently, and that's exposed. So yeah, my experience of SPFBO, this is the first time I've actually managed to make it, which is like, yay! I do actually have 5 books out in this series. This particular one is actually the prequel. It's number 2 in this sort of the run as it goes. And I did actually only publish it last year. But I have tried and tried and tried for the last 3 years to enter SPFBO. But every time I saw a post going, oh, SPFBO's open for entries, I've missed the deadline. Just see the post. You know, when Facebook shows you things and you don't realize it's 5 days and there's such a short time frame that you've got to get your book in. Whenever I've done that before, I have been there and it's no, closed, no more entries. So I couldn't believe it when somebody actually gave me a heads up, literally within an hour of this opening. And I was like, yes, nobody disturb me while I put this in and I might actually get an entrant. And then I couldn't believe it when I actually got to be one of the lucky 300. So I'm over the moon about that and just thrilled to be a part of it, really. I keep hearing about it and, you know, reading some of the books that are recommended and reading some of the blogs, etc., but never managed to actually make it until now. So, yay! So excited.
Oh, I love that. We have all right, felt that in my feelings. So there's a whole group. We know that, like I said earlier, about half of the people who entered were selected, or a little more than half. But everybody who wasn't selected can try again next year, to Jan's point. So don't be disappointed. Don't
trying
be
for 3 years.
Come back next year and take advantage of the people who are putting up lists of the books who entered but didn't get drawn. There's the joy of SPFBO is the community and the connections, and so you have this extra opportunity to like connect now before next year. But yeah, thank you for sharing, Jen. That's really inspiring. It's like, don't give up.
Don't give up. 3 years it took me.
And this is going to be the year.
You never know. You never know. But at least you're in with a shot. If you don't try, you don't succeed, do you?
No. Yeah, and yes, there are lists. RA, if you're in the official SPFBO Facebook group, which is just SPFBO on Facebook, and you're an author, if you entered but didn't get drawn, there's a post in there. You can look through the posts, and there should be one where people are putting together lists for SPFNO books, I think. And then a couple blogs were mentioning them too. So, Ivor, thank you so much for joining. It is so good to have you on. Tell us a little bit about your book and your experience with SPFBO.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me. I have my own teeny tiny YouTube channel, so I know how much effort you have to go and you have to put into the background in order to put a video in front of viewers. So really thank you so much for the immense amount of work you're putting in. So I'm Ivor K. Hill. I've been writing
it's my
since
pleasure.
about
I'm just glad to get
2019.
to talk to you guys and meet so many new authors.
Sure. Yeah, so I've been writing since 2019, which was when I finished my PhD. But I kind of had this horrible realization, this real kind of spine-tingling moment when I realized that I just spent 3 years writing a massive book and there's no magic, there were no swords, there were no dragons in it. So I thought the best way to fix that would be to write an epic fantasy novel. And I guess I'm probably like everyone else in that I started off by my ambition outstripped my skill to an insane degree, which is why it took me until 3 weeks ago to finally publish my first novel, because the quintology of 200,000 word books that I originally thought I should write was a bit too much. So I heard about SPFBO, I think maybe 2 years ago, and I've just been keeping an eye on it, and was really delighted to get in. My book is the First Scars. It started life as a short story. I kind of went from trying to write a million words to trying to write one novel, and that was too hard. I didn't have the skill yet to write one novel, so I'm part of the Glasgow Sci-Fi and Fantasy Writers Circle, which were pretty heavily involved in Worldcon this year, so you might have seen the name somewhere. So the novel's been through them 3 times. I've taken creative writer courses and stuff, and then eventually a short story kind of grew arms and legs and became a novel. The short story was inspired originally by Elden Ring and Bloodborne, which are probably my favorite kind of computer games. But it's not game lit. It's not a lit RPG. It's inspired by the very kind of
Not
sophisticated.
lit RPG, is it?
No. It's inspired by the way in which those games treat themes of death and life and cyclicality and the the way that characters have to try and persist in very difficult situations. So it's thematically inspired. It's almost like going full circle. Like these games have been inspired by, all of our favorite novels, and I got inspired to write a novel from the games, right? And the premise is really, it's very simple. In this fictional land, it's called the Fatherland. It's ruled by the same family from generation to generation. A curse strikes for some reason every 30 or 40 years, and they blame the neighboring country. And whenever the curse happens, there's a call that goes out for people to volunteer and take the brand. And if you take the brand, then you can resurrect and come back from death, and then the branded go off to try and do something about the curse. So really simple premise. They obviously have a really bad time. And the main theme I'm looking at with the novel is kind of a rounded treatment of violence. Violence, trauma, persistence, what it means to be the perpetrator, what it means to be the victim. So I'm from Northern Ireland, which is the part of Ireland that is part of the United Kingdom, and the second half of the 20th century saw about 35 years, I think, of de facto small-scale civil war, a conflict in which 4,500 people lost their lives. So I think if you're from Northern Ireland, you grew up, if you're as old as I am, under a kind of a spectre of threat and violence. And I think if you do that, you develop an interest in reconciliation and thinking about these things very carefully. So The First Scars is kind of it's a dark epic fantasy. It's kind of in the action adventure mode, but it's quite thematic, I think. Yeah, and I'm really delighted to have it in the competition. I'm looking forward to getting to know the community more as well.
Yeah, is this your first year doing SPFBO?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So first time. Rose, how about you? First time?
Yeah, it's also my first time in a startling turn of events. So I've been writing for like basically my whole life, but like publishing for a much shorter period of time. So this is the book I've entered this year, Hallowed. And so it's my first book in the sense that like it's the book that I started writing first. But then I did publish like 2 novellas before this actually came out. And so, yeah, so I've been working on this for like longer than most things stick around in my life. And it's very different from how it started life. But the important parts of it never changed, which is that it's a story about these 2 people on the cover and their relationship. And which is, so we have, so it's a world where there's a race of people called Hallowed who don't age and they live like centuries. And so we have Avenel up here, who is a retired assassin, who incredibly old, retired assassin, has seen all kinds of stuff, very jaded. And then we have Dina down here, who is 16 and has never left her village of like 500 people and knows absolutely nothing. And so terrible things happen. Her village burns down, and they end up having to travel together and have this kind of like found family sort of dynamic. They also like pick up some other societal rejects along the way. And so it's a story about destiny, about prophecy, about finding your place in the world, and also finding your people. It's also sad. I write sad books. Some people don't like that, and I apologize to those people, but I write sad books. And I always feel like I need to like get that out in advance, because people like they read the first chapter and then people start dying, and then they're like, oh, I don't like this. And I'm like, that's okay. But so now I just like get ahead of that by telling everyone it's sad. I write sad books. All of my books are sad. They're for people who like crying to sad music like I do. So this is my first SPFBO, because my previous books weren't long enough. They were novellas. And I am nervous and excited, but very happy to meet all of you.
Yeah, I love that my books are sad. Being a dark fantasy writer, in one of my most recent books, I made the decision to write out a like opening that's essentially like, no matter what you might think from the cover of the book, although I hope if they look at the cover they think dark fantasy, because otherwise I'm selling the book to the wrong people. But like, this is not a book for people who have to have a happy ending. But if you like love that when it's broken is so tragic your heart breaks into pieces, then this is the book for you. There's a definite group of us who enjoy knowing that there are people who are in even worse situations than we are and still somehow manage to find something worth fighting for, because then it means there's something worth fighting for us. I say as a reader of that genre. So it's like, yes, bring me all the sadness. Lemony Snicket started this young. Okay, it just is the way it is.
Yeah, and there's like a catharsis to like crying over a good sad ending, like just you and a book and a box of tissues curled up in bed, like.
No, most of mine are bittersweet on the ending. The one I've got in SPFBO this year is Splitting Dawn, and it's a dark epic fantasy with like a romantic reverse harem subplot, but it's mostly about a war between vampire elves and humans and demons. And the only one who gets a happy ending at the end of book one is the villain, but not in the way you would think. And I was like, the main character is still alive at the end of book one. Little tiny hint there, but sort of a bittersweet, like, this is the way things need to be for now. So I'm not going to promise anything going on in the future books, but that's sort of like, yeah. So heading in here, we've got Rose and Ivor together in Fantasy Faction, I believe, as the blog you've been assigned to. So welcome, competitors. And I think the rest of us are sort of scattered out in other blogs. So have you looked at the blog you're in yet, Ivor? And what have you thought, if you have, about like your book and being in the group and the competitors in this year? No pressure, because Rose is like right here. So
I think that is a rabbit hole that you can very easily overthink yourself within. So yeah, I checked out all the blogs, and I'm planning on engaging with things a lot more once the competition starts. But I think that I've had people read bits of my writing and come up with the most wild interpretations about what's actually happening. 3 different people having 3 different, So I'm just happy to be involved. I think I don't mind, which I would have been equally happy with being in any of the blogs, I think. Although I'm scared about going up against Rose.
I love RA says 2 enters, 1 leaves, 300 enter and 1 leaves. But we're here for all the fun stuff before that. Yes. Oh, Rose, how about you? Sort of looking at the blog this year, and I mean, Fantasy Faction is like the very first one on the list, because my understanding from Mark is that this list is in order of how long each of these groups have judged SPFBO. So it's like the order of tenure. So you're right there at the top where everybody sees your books.
Yeah, that's pretty lucky. I did like, like take a quick look at it. I didn't look too much in depth because I just have a lot of other stuff going on. I have a 1-year-old. So that's a lot. And she's a clinger. She just kind of like refuses to nap on any other surface than my torso. Um, but I did take a quick look at it, and I think, yeah, like similar to what Ivor said, like I'm just happy to be here, right? It's, like the judging itself is like any kind of like review or like judging process is going to be slightly subjective. It's going to be up to like not every book is everyone's cup of tea, especially with something like this where it's like randomly assigned instead of like subgenre assigned. So I'm not I guess like I'm not putting like too much emotional weight on the outcome. So, I'm not going to be like terribly upset if I get eliminated right away or anything like that. I'm just kind of, it's like going into a room with like a bunch of really excellent people. And then you're just kind of like, wow, I'm just glad I got an invite to the party kind of vibe, So.
And now I'm muted. Yep. Yeah, I think that's definitely the way to go about it, is sort of go with the flow a little bit. You can pull back and come back in and pull back and come back in, as one of the finalists from SPFBO 9 said last week on our panel. You don't have to be like totally plugged in all the time. You can sort of burn out that way. And I will be here doing SPFBO News Weekly again this year, which is essentially a roundup for those who don't want to be plugged in all the time. You can come back once a week and just, here are the ones who are cut and from which blog. Here are the ones that are safe for now. And then when it gets down to finalists, here are the ones that made it to semifinalists and stuff like that too. How about you, Talib, coming in here for the first time and seeing the blog you're assigned to?
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying earlier, if I had got Esme Weatherwax, since she's clearly a Discworld fan, I think that would have been really cool. But I think, this book will still be good, because I mean, this critique reviews could still work really interestingly, because the critiquing chemist, I presume she's got a background in chemistry, so this book has like a lot of like science interpreted through a fantasy world. So like the chemistry and chanting is kind of like engineering, and there's a little bit of the gravity of the coin, like it has different fields of gravity on each face. I think she'd like that. And yeah, like Rose, like you were saying, I'm okay with if the review's great, awesome. If the review's not great, that's okay. I got the chance for people to read it and give their thoughts on it, which will help me for the future books. And recently I just got my first 2-star review on Goodreads after getting a bunch of 5 stars. I was like, oh, I got a streak of 6 5-star reviews or whatever, and then suddenly 1 2. I was like, well, at least, and all the people who gave the 5-star reviews are people who found the book because they liked the concept. But presumably, maybe now that it's on, it went straight to the, SPFBO. Maybe someone just picked it at random, started reading it and didn't like it, and then put the review. But now I'm like, okay, now it's nicer because now I get a sense of there's an authenticity. I'm not just pulling from people who would naturally like the book, but getting people who might be, have a new take on it because they're not the typical audience of it. So yeah, I'm excited, and yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that is such a good point. The blogs, there's no real strategy going in for, the book and the blogs, because the book's submitted, it's assigned to a blog. That's pretty much it on that level. But there's so much to be gleaned from seeing how people outside your subgenre might pick up your book, like you said, or seeing that you may have another target subgenre you didn't know you had. You can reach out to down the line too if they end up loving it.
That's true.
Yeah. How about you, Jen?
I feel very lucky just to be a part of it, number one. I think out of the other people on my list, I think I might be the only historical fantasy, probably because it is pretty niche anyway, to be fair. So there's not a lot of us around. So I don't know whether that's going to stand me in good stead or not. I had a flick through the blog, and there is somebody there that says they like historical fantasy. So I can only hope that they pick up my book, because, yay, that would be fantastic and awesome. I don't know, it's really hard. What is weird, though, is that of all of the chunks of sort of, 30 books, the section, the blog that I've been assigned to, or my book's been assigned to, I've actually read quite a few of those other books on my list, my competitors, and I'm like, no, really stiff competition here, because I've read their books, so I know they're good. So that's worrying me a little bit, but it is, it's what it is what it is. You've just got to take it and see what they think and hope.
Yeah, that's a good way to go about it. You go in and look, and honestly, it doesn't really matter a whole lot. I learned this last year. A.R. Whittam was in the bucket with me last year in Fantasy Book Critic, and A.R. Whittam has a lot of renown to his name. And I had actually read one of his books, and I had given it a 5-star review, and I was like, "Oh, I'm done. I'm over. Stick a fork in me." But then as I went through, I realized that the SPFBO judges look at things very differently. It doesn't matter what the author's achieved. It matters solely on the content of the book for the book's sake and those that are there with it, and which one is the best example of quality fiction among all of them in that group. And that seemed to hold true across the blogs. And that made it so refreshing, because then it's like, it doesn't matter that if you sold, 1,000 copies or 1 copy. All it matters is that it's good quality fiction, and we're celebrating the fact that there is good quality fiction in indie. So you got this, Jan. Yeah, Anthony, tell us a little bit about how you're feeling in your blog.
I haven't, I'll be honest, I share the sentiments of everyone else. I've been trying to stay kind of unplugged until the competition starts. Then I plan to plug in a little bit more, because I don't really want to worry myself too much. I'm grateful to get my work and my story out there and get eyeballs on it. I'm in Captured in Words, and I did check out his blog and watch a couple of his videos. It seems like he likes a lot of the tropes, the fantasy tropes that are included in my story. So I'm hopeful on that, in that regard, but mostly just grateful for the opportunity and excited to see what happens.
Yeah, I'm a great booktuber there for Captured in Words. Yeah. So, last year, most of the SPFBO finalists had character-driven stories and great character growth, which everybody present in this panel sounds like you have. So I'm curious to hear what kind of main character you have. Rose, I'm actually going to let you start, because you chatted about your characters a little bit already, and telling us what your story was about. But tell us a little bit about who is the main character, sort of what's their dream. You don't have to tell us if they get it or not, but who are we following into your book?
So the main point of view is with Dina here, our teenage girl, and part of that is just practicality in terms of you're introducing a world. You pick someone who's not seen a lot of it to be your reader's eyes and ears. The actual I guess driving the plot forward, decision making, is sort of split between the two. So it's sort of like a dual protagonist situation. And part of it is just because they're together for most of the book, and so it's very intertwined. And it's about their relationship and their bond that forms, that sort of almost parental bond that forms between them. So Dina's deal is mostly, and the reason why it ends up being she's like I said, she's the the main POV, just because she knows less about the world, and so she gets to have things explained to her. But also the sort of like the inciting incident that like sets them on this journey together is that her village burns down. So her deal throughout the book is mostly just unprocessed trauma. And trying to find a place that's safe, trying to find that sense of like family and home again, is sort of like, and then like other external things happen to her, like they find out stuff about like basically like secrets that her mom was like keeping from her and stuff like that, and that like has like is like an external driving force as well. But primarily like in terms of like the actual like character arc that she goes through, it is just mostly going from being scared and alone and uncertain to basically finding people that she feels at ease with and is comfortable with again. And then for Avenel, our retired assassin over here, she's had like several centuries of just being this like sort of lone wolf, sort of like soldier kind of mentality where she's not like totally like, I don't like other people and I never want to talk to other people. But she kind of keeps people at arm's length, even people that she likes or respects or is friendly with. And so she has to go through basically going from protecting this child out of like a sense of obligation to protecting this child because she genuinely loves her and like wants to keep her safe. So that's sort of like where the character trajectories go. And neither of them are like looking for it at the start. But it's sort of like what you need versus what you want, right? So
yeah. Lovely conflict there too, between self and duty. And yeah, that's awesome. Anthony, how about you? Tell us a little bit about if you had to pick one character that you feel like really epitomizes everything, who would that be?
Well, I also have a bit of a dual protagonist situation going on, and the main character is a late teens female, and I can't tell you too much about her because that takes away some of the mystery of the first third of the book. But I can say that she and the other main protagonist meet at the beginning of the book under very precarious circumstances, and through a fortuitous turn of events, they get sent on their own journeys through the world, and it kind of follows both of them on a journey of self-discovery and personal growth as they're encountering dangerous situations and figuring out who they are in the world. So it's pretty fun, pretty exciting. I think you'll like it.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. And I'm very intrigued that we got someone who's going to be a super mysterious main character. Because these days it seems like so often in fantasy, and I'm not knocking this because I think this is a good strategy for a lot of fantasy books, is we know everything about the main character and then the book is about figuring out everything else. So it's actually really refreshing to be like, here's a main character, but you're not going to get to know everything about them until like 3 chapters in. So I know which book, I'm bad about this, so kudos to you. Which book doesn't have a character info dump for the developmental editor to give
Yeah, exactly. It's part of the mystery and the intrigue of finding out who she is and figuring it all out along with her. So
yeah. And my editor is probably, if she's watching this live, it's like, take notes. Read it and take notes. Oh, how about you, Ivor?
I also have 2 main characters, or 2 characters who are more main than the other characters, which seems to be, is that all of us, or at least 4 of us? So I have Nico, who is he's actually inspired by interviews I saw at the start of the Ukraine war with members of the Russian public, specifically people who seemed to very much perceive the situation that this war had to be done to protect Russia from Ukraine. What interested me about that was thinking about how we treat information. So confirmation bias, cognitive dissonance, what we do with information that makes us uncomfortable, and how we twist that information to fit our worldview. Nico is very much influenced by that idea, which makes him very hard to write. And this book would have been out 6 months ago if that hadn't been so well, hard for me at least. He's also, his main motivation is very simple. He's desperate for recognition, which makes him a really good vehicle to kind of explore like toxic masculinity, zealotry, and the other information-based themes. He is essentially who I would be horrified to wake up and discover that I am, if that makes sense. If someone was to hold a magic mirror up and say, actually, Ivor, this is who you really are, he is who I would most dislike to find out that I am. Now, my other main character is Tasha, and she is kind of who I would love to be in my day-to-day life, which is very cruel of me because it means that she suffers. She in this book she kind of fights my battles for me a little bit. She struggles with my anxiety. One fun question I get to explore with her is when to perform strength, when to perform weakness, who we do that with. So she's who I kind of aspire to be. In universe, Nico has just been banished from the kind of secret police of the Fatherland. And the reason for his banishment is kind of, like we said before, is a mystery that is unveiled as things proceed. And Tasha's motivation is, if you remember, the book is about kind of about ending this curse. This curse, and her motivation is where she is from is where the curse has struck, and you might kind of get the idea that these aren't characters who have much in common or get on terribly well. So yeah, that's Nico and Tasha are my main characters.
Yeah. Beautiful tortured souls.
Sure.
But I wonder if they get a happy ending. Going back to what we were talking about earlier with the dark endings. We'll have to read to find out, right?
Yeah, I don't want to spoil things too much, but I kind of do a bit of a rug pull with one of them. There's a bit of a corruption arc involved, which is part of why, a pretty challenging thing to do with your first book. But I'll not say anymore.
Awesome. So now I'm intrigued. Even more than I was. How about you? So let's see. I want to make sure I got everybody. Talib, we haven't done your character yet, right? And Jen. So Talib, how about you?
Okay, so my character, the main character, these are the two main characters. I say, like everyone else, I have two main characters. The one who's mostly the main character of this story is Mizan. His name is Mizan al-Wasati, which so his name actually means in the middle, and his character is kind of like that. Like he's trying to balance a lot of things. He comes from he doesn't really belong anywhere because he lives in the North Pole, which is where the story takes place. But he's actually from the goblin side of the coin. And he's trying to, I think his motivation is, like I was mentioning before, he's trying to find how to use his skills he's learned. He's very book smart, but he doesn't really know what he wants to do in the world. And he's also hopelessly in love with the love interest, who is her name is Dana Intaopsa. She is half goblin, but also half dark elf. And so the world kind of her motivation, what's going on with her in the story, has to do a lot with this city. So the North Pole has like the biggest of the gemstones, like all these different little gemstones that are valuable. There's a huge one called the North Stone, and it's like a pilgrimage site that people are going to. And it's also because it's at the top, like everybody is contesting, fighting over this piece of land, and it's a lot like what we see in our world today, in a certain part of the world. And the current government that has control of it's called Friedheim, the name of the city, and they are kind of like a very chauvinist, fair elf, kind of almost apartheid. Like they're putting people in different areas. So like there were local dwarves that lived in this polar cold landscape of Friedheim, and they were like we're going to push you all into the underground because you're dwarves and you're supposed to be there. Like that's what they make it like a propaganda, like you weren't supposed to be here anyway. And then they and you can see a lot of the parallels in our world today. And they put the dark elves, which is like her father, Dana's father, he's the dark elf, so they put him into the underground as well. And they put the goblins in the goblin quarter, and then they keep the sort of the center of the city to themselves, only letting people in for pilgrimage and things like that. And Dana's father, he gets deported for something very, very small. So she's all of a sudden she's found without anyone in the city, and she, from Mizan's perspective, she's nowhere to be found. She's gone missing. She won't. She's not at her house, and he's wondering what the heck happened to her. And eventually it turns out that there's kind of a conspiracy that's going on, and she has, she's fallen in love with this very charismatic preacher of a particularly sort of violent sect. So there's a religion of the people who come for pilgrimage called the Way, and she herself is a sister of the Way. Like it's kind of like very inspired by like the Sufi dervish orders of like the Middle East and Turkey. They used to have like they still do have brotherhoods and sisterhoods. So it's not quite like Christian monks, because they do get married. They do, they play, they're not celibate or anything like that. But she's a part of a sisterhood, which is attached to a brotherhood. And this particular preacher that comes along is from a particularly fringe and very violent sect. And so she's in love with him, and Mizan is in love with her. And there's, a lot of stuff that ensues about this thing that they discover about the enchanting magic. And I think, like, from Mizan's perspective, like, you were saying you were like fighting your battles for you. I feel like I'm doing that a lot with Mizan in this book, and also in the next few books of like, he's very book smart, but he doesn't necessarily know how to be brave or how to stand up for anything. And so this is kind of how he figures out how to stand up to his own demons or his own weaknesses. And then it's very, right now the first book is very focused on him as a protagonist, but the next book, Dana is like one of the major, she's probably the bigger protagonist in the next book. So that's what I'm working on, and excited for hope people who read it enjoy it.
That sounds really great. Really gripping on both sides. I love that we got so many dual POV books represented. The one year I'm like, man, I didn't bring my dual POV game this year very much. I mean, I got some other POVs that slip in, but not like chapter. Oh, yeah, this is mostly going to be one person's. But how about you, Jan?
Oh, mine really is chapter, alternating POVs, because they're very, very different points of view. Obviously, it is a romantasy. So yeah, in that sense, there is a traditional kind of enemies to lovers. They have lots of misunderstandings along the way. They're coming from the off from entirely different perspectives. Tal is not only human, but he's really, really uptight, tormented. You find out pretty early on that obviously he's a thief, because that's in the first chapter when he gets busted. But you don't really understand quite why he's been forced into that position until a little bit later on, by which point obviously he's been forced down a path of no return and heading to war. Aoife, on the other hand, you kind of don't actually get an awful lot of information about her, not even right through to the end. There's hints, but he just has no idea what he's dealing with at all, where she's come from, whereas she's just approaching the human world with this childlike naivety of, wow, why is your king a man? And who says he's king? Why does he have to be king? Who says it? What powers does he have that makes him king? So there's that whole kind of discussion there about looking at the different society. And the reason for that is that it is very different, the world 500 years ago to how we are now. So it does have a magical feel about it as a world. And in terms of characters, they do come together. It is a character-led piece in that sense, because they have they discover shared ground, common ground. And then obviously there's a nice big twist as well. So yeah, it's not that easy. It is very definitely 2 points of view that have to come together. So.
Yeah. Awesome. So we got lots of great multi-POV books. So if you are watching and you love multi-POV, this is the group to start digging through. The links to all of their books are in the description box too. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can just scroll down and grab them from there. I put the whole Mark Lawrence list too, because sometimes you get curious and then your TBR is sad, but you're happy because you found all these new books and you can scroll through and look there. But thank you all so much for joining me and being part of the Blitz and talking about being here for SPFBO for your first year. I wish you all the best.
Thanks so much.
Good luck, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. This is really good that you're connecting us, because otherwise we're just in our own world. Like,
Yeah.
It's nice. It's nice to talk to other authors.
Yeah.
So true. And Ivor, good luck with you and your YouTube as well. Are you going to be featuring any SPFBO content we should look out for?
I might steal some footage from your channel. We'll see.
Awesome. Yes. Rising tide lifts all the boats here, right?
Definitely.
it's true.
Yeah. All right, everybody. I wish you all the best. If you're viewing as a reader or a fellow author and you want more SPFBO stuff, the Blitz is still going on. Like I said at the beginning, it's going to go on through Saturday. We have several more panels. This is only panel 16. So you can check out the full playlist to catch up on the ones you missed and subscribe to catch the new ones. Bye, everybody.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.